In the gleaming boardroom of Ashworth Industries, a young woman from rural Pennsylvania was about to sign documents that would change everything. What started as a routine corporate acquisition took a shocking turn when she came face to face with the family who had once rejected her. Maya Sullivan wasn't your typical tech entrepreneur. For 5 years, she had spent her life building an empire from nothing, known for her ruthless determination and strategic brilliance. When she encountered the Ashworth family's stunned silence, she had no idea she was walking into an emotional minefield that would force her to choose between revenge and redemption, a choice that would ultimately transform them all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Sullivan's pen hovered above the signature line for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds to savor the weight of this moment before it became irreversible. The mahogany boardroom of Ashworth Industries stretched before her like a battlefield where she'd finally claimed victory. Around the polished table, faces watched with varying degrees of shock, resignation, and barely contained fury. She signed with deliberate precision. "Congratulations, Miss Sullivan," the lead attorney said, his voice professionally neutral despite the tension crackling through the room. "You are now the majority shareholder and chief executive officer of Ashworth Industries." Victoria Ashworth's manicured fingers gripped her chair arms so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Beside her, Richard Ashworth stared at the documents as if they might spontaneously combust. And there, across the table, James watched Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between admiration and devastation. Maya closed the folder with a soft snap that seemed to echo in the silence. "Thank you." The words felt strange on her tongue. 5 years ago, she'd stood in this very building, a different floor, a smaller room, listening to these same people explain why she wasn't suitable for their family. The memory surfaced unbidden, sharp as broken glass. "Maya, dear," Victoria had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Surely you understand. The Ashworth name carries certain expectations. James has a responsibility to his heritage." Maya had been 23 then, wearing her best dress, a navy blue piece from Target that she'd saved 3 weeks to buy. She'd thought it looked professional, sophisticated. Now she knew better. Victoria had seen right through it to the scholarship girl beneath, the daughter of a single mother who cleaned office buildings to pay for her daughter's dreams. "Ms. Sullivan?" The attorney's voice pulled her back to the present. She blinked, refocusing on the room where she now held all the power. "Yes?" "The transition documents. If you're ready to proceed." Maya nodded, accepting the next set of papers. Each signature transferred another piece of the Ashworth empire into her hands. Manufacturing facilities across 3 states. Patents dating back decades. A workforce of over 2,000 employees who had no idea their world was about to change. The pen felt heavier with each stroke. Richard cleared his throat. "Maya, Ms. Sullivan, I hope you'll consider the employees in whatever changes you're planning. Some of these people have worked for us for 20, 30 years. His voice carried the weight of defeat, but also genuine concern. Maya remembered that about him, how he'd always seemed more reasonable than his wife. Not reasonable enough to defend Maya 5 years ago, but reasonable enough to worry about his workers now. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Ashworth," Maya replied, her tone carefully neutral. "Any decisions I make will be in the best interests of the company's future." Victoria's laugh was sharp as winter wind. "The company's future. How noble." Her blue eyes, the same shade as James's, fixed on Maya with undisguised hatred. "Tell me, dear, how exactly does a girl from—" She paused as if the words themselves were distasteful. "From rural Pennsylvania acquire the capital for a hostile takeover of this magnitude?" Maya met her gaze steadily. "Hard work, strategic partnerships, and the kind of hunger you get when someone tells you that you'll never be good enough." The barb hit its mark. Victoria's face flushed, but before she could respond, James spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "Maya." Just her name, but it carried 5 years of regret. She looked at him, really looked, and felt something crack in her chest. He was still handsome, still carried himself with that easy confidence that money and breeding provided. But there were lines around his eyes now, a weight to his shoulders that hadn't been there in college. James. She kept her voice level, professional. I need to ask. Later. The word came out sharper than she'd intended. We can discuss the transition privately. Right now, I have a company to address. The attorney shuffled his papers. The all-hands meeting has been scheduled for 4 o'clock. Maya checked her watch. 2:30. Enough time to prepare her remarks. To steel herself for what came next. She practiced this speech 100 times. But standing here in the room where her dreams had first been shattered, the words felt different. Before we adjourn, Victoria said, her voice silk over steel, I want you to know that this isn't over. The Ashworth name means something in this city, in this industry. You may have bought the company, but you'll never belong to it. Maya stood slowly, gathering her papers with deliberate calm. Mrs. Ashworth, I learned a long time ago that belonging isn't something you're given. It's something you take. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor with measured confidence. But as her hand reached for the handle, Victoria's voice followed her. You're still the same little girl who wasn't good enough then. Buying our company won't change that. Maya paused, her hand tightening on the brass handle. For a moment she was 23 again, humiliated and heartbroken. Then she turned back, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. You're right about one thing, Mrs. Ashworth. I am the same girl who wasn't good enough for your son 5 years ago. She smiled, sharp as a blade. I'm also the woman who just bought your family's legacy. We'll see which one matters more. The door closed behind her with a satisfying click. Maya walked down the hallway toward the executive elevator, past portraits of Ashworth patriarchs who'd built this company over a century. Soon, her portrait would hang here. The thought should have felt triumphant. Instead, as the elevator doors closed, and she caught her reflection in the polished steel, Maya wondered why victory felt so much like falling. The elevator descended toward the main floor, where 2,000 employees waited to meet their new CEO. Maya straightened her jacket and prepared to address them, prepared to begin the transformation of Ashworth Industries into something new, something hers. The doors opened with a soft chime, and Maya stepped into her future, leaving the ghost of her past scattered across the boardroom floor 30 stories above. The elevator descended with mechanical precision, but Maya's thoughts spiraled back to that boardroom. Victoria's words echoed in her mind. You'll never belong to it, as the floors ticked by. 28, 27, 26. Maya. She turned. James stood at the back of the elevator, having slipped in just before the doors closed. His presence filled the small space with tension thick enough to cut. I didn't hear you get on, she said, keeping her voice steady. You were focused. He stepped closer, and she caught the familiar scent of his cologne, the same one he'd worn in college. We need to talk. Do we? Maya faced forward, watching the floor numbers descend. I think your mother said everything that needed saying. My mother doesn't speak for me. His voice carried an edge she remembered from their arguments years ago. She never did. The elevator shuddered to a stop at the 15th floor. Maya jabbed the close button before anyone could board. Funny, she said. That's not how I remember it. James moved to stand beside her, their reflections side by side in the steel doors. 5 years ago, I was 24 and terrified of disappointing everyone. I was a coward. And now? Now I'm 29 and terrified of disappointing myself. Maya's finger hovered over the lobby button. What do you want, James? I want to apologize. For what happened? For not fighting harder. His voice dropped. For letting you walk away. I didn't walk away. The words came out sharp. I was pushed out. There's a difference. The elevator resumed its descent. 10 floors left. I know. James's reflection met her eyes in the steel. And I'm sorry. I've been sorry for 5 years. Sorry doesn't change anything. Maybe not. But it's a start. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the lobby. Maya stepped out without looking back, but James's voice followed her. Maya, whatever you're planning for the company, for my family, just remember that not everyone who hurt you meant to. She paused, her hand gripping her briefcase handle. Intent doesn't minimize impact, James. You should know that by now. The lobby buzzed with nervous energy. Employees clustered in small groups, whispering. Maya walked through them like a ship cutting through water, her heels clicking against marble that had been laid when the first Ashworth built this empire. Elena waited by the main auditorium doors, her expression carefully neutral. Maya's oldest friend and business partner had flown in from their San Francisco headquarters specifically for this moment. How did it go? Elena asked quietly. Better than expected. Maya adjusted her jacket. Are you ready for this? Elena studied her face. The question is, are you? Because once you walk through those doors and address those employees, there's no going back. This becomes real. Maya thought of James in the elevator, of Victoria's hatred, of her own reflection looking back at her from the steel doors. It became real the moment I signed the papers. Maya, Elena caught her arm. Remember why we started Sullivan Tech. Remember who you were before this became about revenge. The words hit deeper than Maya cared to admit. She pulled away gently. I remember everything, Elena. That's the problem. The auditorium doors loomed before them. Beyond those doors waited 2,000 employees who had no idea their world was about to change. Maya took a breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped into her future as the woman who had conquered the empire that once rejected her. The morning newspaper hit Maya's desk with the force of a declaration of war. The headline blazed across the business section. Tech upstart's hostile takeover raises questions about qualifications and motives. Maya didn't need to read the byline to know Victoria Ashworth's fingerprints were all over this. The article was a masterclass in character assassination disguised as business journalism. Anonymous sources questioned Maya's experience running a manufacturing company. Former Harvard classmates were quoted expressing surprise at her ruthless tactics. Most damning was a paragraph suggesting her takeover was motivated by personal vendetta rather than sound business strategy. Elena set a cup of coffee beside the paper. She moves fast. I'll give her that. Faster than I expected. Maya scanned the article again, noting each carefully placed insinuation. She's good at this. Better than good. She's been playing this game since before we were born. Elena settled into the chair across from Maya's new office, Richard Ashworth's former domain. The Wall Street Journal is running a similar piece tomorrow. So is Forbes. Maya leaned back in the leather chair that still smelled like Richard's expensive cigars. Let me guess. More anonymous sources? More questions about my motivations? And your background? Apparently, several business leaders are, quote, concerned about someone with your limited manufacturing experience taking over such an established company. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. These same business leaders wouldn't have given her a second glance 5 years ago. Now they were lining up to tear her down. A knock interrupted her thoughts. David Ashworth stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable but determined. James's younger brother had always been the outlier in the family, more artist than businessman, more idealist than pragmatist. Ms. Sullivan, could I have a moment? Elena rose. I'll be outside if you need me. David closed the door behind her and took the seat Elena had vacated. Up close, Maya could see the resemblance to James, but where James carried himself with practiced confidence, David seemed perpetually uncertain. I wanted to apologize for the media circus, he said without preamble. My mother. She's not handling this well. I noticed. Maya gestured to the newspaper. Though I have to admit, she's thorough. She's also wrong. David's voice strengthened. About you, about this takeover. I've been watching what you've built with Sullivan Tech. Your employee retention rates, your innovation pipeline, your profit margins. You're exactly what this company needs. Maya studied him carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because I care about the people who work here. My parents see them as assets on a balance sheet. But these are real people with mortgages and kids and dreams. He leaned forward. I know you've started making changes. The layoffs in accounting, the restructuring in operations. People are scared. Change is always scary. But necessary. I get that. What I don't get is why you're doing it alone. David pulled out his phone, showing her a spreadsheet. I've been analyzing our inefficiencies for years. I have recommendations that could save jobs while improving productivity. Maya took the phone, scrolling through detailed analyses and proposals. The work was impressive, thorough, insightful, and surprisingly sophisticated for someone who claimed to have no interest in the family business. You've been planning this for a while, she observed. I've been hoping someone would care enough to listen. David's smile was rueful. My father's a good man, but he's been running this company the same way for 20 years. My mother's more concerned with appearances than actual performance. And James, he trailed off. James, what? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. James has been trying to prove himself worthy of inheriting something he never really wanted. He's too busy playing the dutiful son to see what this place actually needs. Maya handed back the phone. And what does it need? Someone who understands that a company is only as strong as its people. Someone who's willing to make the hard choices for the right reasons. David met her eyes. Someone like you. Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Elena. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. Marcus Webb was in the lobby. Maya looked up to find David watching her with concern. Everything okay? We'll see. She stood, smoothing her skirt. David, I appreciate what you've shared. I'd like to continue this conversation, but right now I have another fire to put out. As David left, Maya stared out the window at the Boston skyline. Victoria's media assault was just the beginning. If Marcus was here, it meant the stakes were about to get much higher. Her phone buzzed again. Elena's message was simple. He's not alone. 3 investors with him. They look serious. Maya straightened her shoulders and prepared for the next battle. In the distance, storm clouds gathered over the harbor, as if the weather itself sensed the conflict ahead. Marcus Webb's smile was all teeth and no warmth as he settled into the chair across from Maya's desk. Behind him, 3 men in expensive suits arranged themselves with the practiced positioning of corporate predators. Maya recognized 2 of them. Venture capitalists with reputations for dismantling companies and selling the pieces. Maya. Marcus's voice carried the false intimacy of old rivals. Congratulations on your acquisition. Quite the coup. Marcus. She kept her tone neutral. To what do I owe the pleasure? Straight to business. I've always admired that about you. He gestured to his companions. I believe you know Anderson and Hartwell from Goldman. And this is Chen from Blackstone. Maya nodded to each man, her mind already calculating angles. Gentlemen. Marcus leaned forward, his expression shifting to something resembling sincerity. Maya, we have a problem. Well, you have a problem. I have a solution. I'm listening. The Ashworth family isn't going down without a fight. Victoria's media campaign is just the opening salvo. Marcus pulled out a tablet, sliding it across the desk. But I have something that could end this war before it really begins. Maya glanced at the screen. Financial documents, environmental reports, tax filings going back a decade. Her eyes widened as she absorbed the implications. Where did you get these? Let's say I have friends in regulatory agencies. Friends who've been watching the Ashworth family for years. Marcus's smile sharpened. Improper waste disposal at 3 facilities. Tax shelters that push the boundaries of legality. Environmental violations that were quietly settled rather than prosecuted. Maya scrolled through the documents, her stomach tightening with each revelation. This could destroy them. Completely. The EPA alone could shut down half their operations. The IRS audit would tie them up for years. Anderson spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Criminal charges aren't out of the question. But here's the beautiful part, Marcus continued. As the new CEO, you'd be in the perfect position to cooperate with investigations. Show that you're cleaning house, rooting out past corruptions. You come out looking like a reformer while they get destroyed. Maya set down the tablet. What's your angle, Marcus? Partnership. Full merger of Sullivan Tech and Ashworth Industries under my venture fund's guidance. You get your revenge, I get a diversified portfolio that dominates both tech and manufacturing. His eyes glittered. Everyone wins. Except the Ashworth family. Except the Ashworth family, he agreed cheerfully. Elena's voice crackled through the intercom. Ms. Sullivan, James Ashworth is here. He says it's urgent. Maya's pulse quickened. Send him in. Marcus frowned. Maya, this isn't the time for... The door opened before he could finish. James strode in, his usually composed demeanor cracked with anxiety. He took in the scene. Marcus, the investors, the tablet on Maya's desk, and his face went pale. We need to talk, James said to Maya. Now. We're in the middle of a meeting, Marcus interrupted. About destroying my family with fabricated evidence? James's voice carried quiet fury. Yeah, I heard. Maya felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. How did you? I have friends too, Maya. Friends who warned me that Marcus has been shopping these allegations around for months, looking for someone with the power to act on them. James stepped closer to the desk. Most of these documents are taken out of context or outright falsified. Marcus's composure slipped. That's ridiculous. Everything here is carefully crafted to look damning while being impossible to quickly verify, James finished. Just like your usual tactics. Maya looked between the two men, her mind racing. You two know each other. Unfortunately, James's jaw tightened. Marcus tried to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Ashworth Industries 18 months ago. When we fought him off, he promised he'd find another way. Marcus stood abruptly. This is exactly the kind of family loyalty that's been holding your company back, Maya. You have a chance to break free from all of this. The sentiment, the history, the complications. Maya studied the tablet again, noting details she'd missed before. Dates that seemed inconsistent. Signatures that looked slightly off. These documents. How long would it take to authenticate them? Months, James said quietly, by which time the damage would be done. Anderson cleared his throat. Ms. Sullivan, authenticity aside, the market impact of releasing these allegations would be immediate and devastating. Your stock price would crash, Maya finished, taking Sullivan Tech down with it. The room fell silent. Maya could feel Marcus's frustration radiating across the desk. She'd seen this look before, the moment when he realized his target wasn't going to be as easy to manipulate as he'd hoped. Maya, Marcus said carefully, this is a limited-time offer, the kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice. Maya closed the tablet and slid it back across the desk. Then I guess I'll have to live with missing it. Marcus's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Don't be naive. The Ashworth family will never accept you. Victoria will keep coming until she destroys everything you've built. I'm offering you a way to end this. You're offering me a way to become like you, Maya replied. That's not the same thing. As Marcus and his investors filed out, their faces dark with frustrated ambition, James remained behind. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Thank you, Maya said finally. Don't thank me yet. James's expression was grim. Marcus doesn't give up easily. And now that you've rejected his offer, he'll try to find another way to destroy both our companies. Maya looked out the window at the storm clouds that had moved closer to shore. Then we'd better be ready for whatever comes next. The war for Ashworth Industries had just escalated, and Maya was beginning to realize that some battles couldn't be won without choosing which principles to sacrifice. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke as Maya stood at her office window, watching rain streak down the glass. The city below blurred into impressionist smears of light and shadow. Behind her, the Ashworth Industries boardroom sat empty, except for two figures, herself and Victoria Ashworth. Victoria had arrived unannounced 20 minutes ago, her usual entourage of assistants and advisors conspicuously absent. She sat at the far end of the conference table, her posture rigid but her hands betraying the slightest tremor as she reached for her coffee cup. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," Victoria said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. Maya turned from the window. The thought had crossed my mind. "I came to tell you the truth. About 5 years ago. About why I really couldn't let you marry my son." Something in Victoria's tone made Maya's chest tighten. This wasn't the elegant viper who'd orchestrated the media attacks. This was a woman who looked every one of her 58 years, worn down by battles Maya was only beginning to understand. "I'm listening." Victoria's laugh held no humor. "You think it was about your background, the scholarship, your mother's job, the money." She shook her head. "It wasn't." Maya remained standing, unwilling to show weakness by sitting. "Then what was it?" "It was you." Victoria's eyes met hers across the polished table. "Your ambition, your intelligence, your absolute refusal to be diminished by anyone or anything." She paused, her voice dropping. I recognized it because I'd seen it before. In myself. The admission hung in the air like incense, heavy and unexpected. Maya felt the ground shift beneath her certainty. "I don't understand." "I married Richard when I was 22. A secretary in his father's law firm who caught the eye of the heir to a manufacturing fortune." Victoria's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. "Everyone said I was a gold digger. That I'd trapped him. That I'd never really belong." Maya's mouth went dry. "Victoria, they were right about one thing. I didn't belong. But I made myself belong. I learned the rules, played the game, built the connections. I turned myself into exactly what an Ashworth wife should be." Victoria's voice grew stronger. "And in the process, I lost everything I'd been before." The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows with increasing urgency. Maya moved closer to the table but didn't sit. "When I met you," Victoria continued, "I saw myself at 23. That hunger. That determination to prove everyone wrong. But I also saw what I'd become, what that hunger had cost me." She looked directly at Maya. "I couldn't watch my son fall in love with someone who would either destroy him or be destroyed by trying to fit into our world. So you destroyed us first. I thought I was protecting him. And maybe," Victoria's voice cracked slightly, "maybe I was protecting you too." Maya felt something fundamental shifting in her chest, like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. "You were afraid. Terrified." Victoria's admission was barely above a whisper. "I saw you and James together, and I knew you'd never be content being an Ashworth wife. You'd want to change things, challenge traditions, modernize everything you touched. You'd either break under the pressure of conformity, or you'd break our family trying to transform it. Instead, you broke us both." "Yes." Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. "And I've watched my son spend 5 years trying to become worthy of a woman who was already extraordinary. I've watched him try to prove himself in a business he never really loved because he thought it would somehow make up for losing you." Maya sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Marcus Webb called me this morning." Victoria's voice hardened again. "He offered to help me destroy you completely. Said he had evidence that would ruin both you and James." Maya's pulse quickened. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that some victories aren't worth the cost." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder. "But I also did some investigating of my own. About Marcus. About his real intentions." She slid the folder across the table. Maya opened it to find financial documents, email printouts, and what looked like corporate espionage reports. "Marcus isn't just targeting Ashworth Industries. Victoria explained. He's been systematically identifying and destroying mid-sized family businesses across New England. The plan is always the same: create chaos, swoop in as a savior, then strip the assets and sell the pieces. Maya scanned the documents, her stomach dropping with each revelation. He's done this before. 7 times in the past 3 years. Each time, he partnered with someone already positioned inside the target company, someone with access and motivation to help him destroy it from within. The implication hit Maya like a physical blow. He's using me. He was planning to create a war between you and my family, then position himself as the solution when the smoke cleared. Victoria's voice carried grim satisfaction. But you turned him down, which means he'll need another approach. A knock at the door interrupted them. David Ashworth peered in, his usually casual demeanor replaced by urgent concern. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. He stepped into the room, tablet in hand. I've been monitoring social media chatter about the company. Marcus just released a statement to several business blogs claiming Maya is planning massive layoffs and facility closures. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. That's not true. I know that, you know that, but 300 employees are in the parking lot right now demanding answers. David's expression was grim. And the local news crews just arrived. Victoria stood slowly, her earlier vulnerability replaced by steely determination. Then we'd better go address them together. Maya stared at her. Together? Marcus wants a war between the old guard and the new leadership? Victoria's smile was sharp as winter moonlight. Let's show him what happens when they unite instead. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the boardroom, something had fundamentally changed. The lines Maya had drawn between enemies and allies were blurring, and she was beginning to understand that the real battle wasn't against the Ashworth family. It was against the forces trying to destroy them all. As they prepared to face the crowd below, Maya caught her reflection in the dark window. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't sure which version of herself was looking back. The employee parking lot had transformed into a battlefield of uncertainty and fear. Maya stood at the main entrance to Ashworth Industries, watching 300 worried faces turn toward her as news cameras rolled. The rain had stopped, but the air remained thick with tension and the promise of more storms to come. Beside her, Victoria maintained her composed facade, though Maya could see the calculated assessment in her eyes as she surveyed the crowd. David flanked Maya's other side, his tablet clutched tight as he monitored the social media firestorm Marcus had ignited. They're scared, Maya murmured, watching a group of assembly line workers cluster together near the back. They should be, Victoria replied quietly. Marcus's statement specifically mentioned the Bedford facility. That's 400 jobs. Maya's jaw tightened. The Bedford facility was one of Ashworth Industries' most profitable operations. Closing it would be business suicide. He's forcing my hand. That's exactly what he's doing. David scrolled through his tablet. The story's already been picked up by the Globe. Stock futures are tanking. Elena appeared at Maya's shoulder, having driven directly from the airport after Maya's emergency call. The board of Sullivan Tech is demanding an emergency meeting. They're worried about contamination from the Ashworth acquisition. Maya felt the walls closing in. In less than 6 hours, Marcus had managed to attack her from every angle: employee confidence, media perception, stock valuation, and now her own company's stability. It was a masterclass in corporate warfare. Ms. Sullivan, a voice called from the crowd. Maya recognized Tom Fletcher, a 20-year veteran of the manufacturing floor. Is it true? Are you shutting down Bedford? Maya stepped forward, and the cameras swiveled to track her movement. Mr. Fletcher, because my daughter just started college, Tom continued, his voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd. Her tuition depends on this job. We all got families depending on this job. More voices joined in, a chorus of legitimate fears being exploited by Marcus's manipulation. Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like lead. I need to set the record straight, Maya called out, her voice projecting across the lot. I have no plans to close the Bedford facility or any other major operations. Then why did Marcus Webb say you did? This from Maria Santos, one of the quality control supervisors. He had documents, showed them on his live stream. David held up his tablet. Those documents were fabricated. I can prove it. But the crowd's attention had shifted as a black town car pulled into the lot. Maya's stomach dropped as she recognized the occupant stepping out. Patricia Sullivan, her mother. Patricia had clearly driven straight from Pennsylvania, still wearing her diner uniform from her morning shift. She moved through the crowd with the quiet dignity that had carried her through 20 years of supporting Maya's dreams, but her face showed the strain of watching her daughter's triumph turn into a public nightmare. "Mom," Maya breathed as Patricia approached. "What are you doing here?" "I saw the news," Patricia said simply. "Figured you might need some perspective." Victoria watched this exchange with sharp interest, and Maya caught a flicker of something unexpected in the older woman's expression. Recognition. Perhaps even respect. "Mrs. Sullivan," Victoria said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Ashworth." Patricia studied the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it. "I know who you are." The crowd had grown quiet, sensing the weight of this moment. 3 generations of women who had shaped Maya's story, standing together in the eye of a corporate hurricane. "Maya," Patricia said, her voice carrying the authority that had guided Maya through childhood struggles and college anxieties. "What did I teach you about bullies?" Maya felt herself transported back to grade school, coming home with scraped knees and hurt feelings, that they only have power if you give it to them. And how do you take that power back? By standing up, by being better, by not becoming what they are. Patricia nodded, then turned to address the crowd. Her voice, strengthened by years of talking to customers over diner noise, carried easily across the lot. "My daughter isn't perfect," Patricia called out, "but she's not a liar, and she's not the enemy here. She grew up understanding what it means to work for a living, to worry about bills and futures, and whether there'll be enough at the end of the month." Elena's phone buzzed with urgent notifications. She glanced at the screen and paled. "Maya, Marcus just called another press conference. He's claiming to have video evidence of you planning the layoffs." Maya felt the last pieces of her careful strategy crumbling. "Video evidence of what?" "I never—" "Deepfake technology," David said grimly. "It's sophisticated enough to fool most people on first viewing." The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't just fighting dirty. He was rewriting reality itself. In an age where video evidence could be manufactured, how could she prove her innocence? "Miss Sullivan," Tom Fletcher called out again, "we need to know. Are our jobs safe?" Maya looked out at the sea of faces. Hard-working people who deserved better than being pawns in a corporate chess game. Behind them, the news cameras captured every moment, every word that would define her leadership and her character. She thought of Marcus's offer in her office, his promises of power and victory through destruction. She thought of Victoria's admission about the cost of ambition. She thought of her mother's lessons about standing up to bullies. "Your jobs are safe," Maya said, her voice carrying across the lot with absolute certainty. "And I'll stake everything I've built to prove it." The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down. Maya had just committed herself to a course of action that could save Ashworth Industries, or destroy everything she'd worked for. As the crowd began to disperse and the cameras packed up, Maya caught her reflection in the company's glass doors. The woman looking back at her was someone she barely recognized. Not the revenge-driven entrepreneur who'd orchestrated the takeover, not the rejected college girl who'd built an empire from hurt feelings, but someone new. Someone who was about to discover what she was really made of when everything was on the line. Elena touched her arm gently. "Maya, how exactly are we going to prove those videos are fake before they destroy us?" Maya's smile was sharp as broken glass. "By doing something Marcus would never expect." "Which is?" "By telling the truth. All of it." The emergency board meeting convened at dawn, with representatives from both Sullivan Tech and Ashworth Industries gathered in the same conference room where Maya had signed the takeover papers just days earlier. The atmosphere was thick with tension and the bitter aroma of too much coffee consumed by too few people getting too little sleep. Maya stood at the head of the table, flanked by Elena and David, facing a jury of 12 board members whose expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile. Victoria sat in the observer section, her presence both surprising and oddly comforting. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya began, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders, "I called this meeting to address the allegations made by Marcus Webb and to present our strategy for moving forward." Elena activated the wall-mounted display, showing a timeline of Marcus's attacks. Over the past 48 hours, Mr. Webb has orchestrated a coordinated assault on both companies using falsified documents, manipulated media coverage, and now deepfake video technology. Board member Harrison Wells, a Sullivan tech founding investor, leaned forward. "Ms. Sullivan, regardless of Mr. Webb's tactics, the damage to our stock price is very real. Sullivan Tech has lost 30% of its value since the Ashworth acquisition was announced." "Which is exactly what Marcus intended," David interjected, surprising several board members with his presence. "He's been systematically targeting family-owned businesses for asset stripping. We're not the first, and we won't be the last if we don't stop him here." Maya stepped closer to the display. David's analysis shows a pattern. Marcus creates chaos, positions himself as a solution, then dismantles successful companies for parts. But his strategy depends on us fighting each other instead of him. "So what do you propose?" This from Janet Morris, Ashworth's longest-serving board member. "Integration." Maya clicked to the next slide, showing detailed financial projections. Not the hostile absorption Marcus expected, but genuine partnership. Sullivan Tech's innovation capabilities combined with Ashworth's manufacturing infrastructure and market presence. The numbers on the screen were impressive, showing potential revenue increases of 40% within 2 years. But Maya could see skepticism in several faces. "It's ambitious," Wells said carefully, "but it doesn't address the immediate crisis." "Those deepfake videos are being analyzed by financial news networks right now." Maya nodded to Elena, who pulled up a new presentation. "Which is why we're getting ahead of the story. In 2 hours, we're holding a joint press conference where Maya will present our integration plan alongside the Ashworth family." "Together?" Morris looked shocked. "After all the acrimony?" Victoria spoke for the first time. "The acrimony was between individuals, not businesses. Maya Sullivan is exactly the kind of leader Ashworth Industries needs to compete in the modern marketplace." The room fell silent. Maya felt a strange mixture of vindication and uncertainty at Victoria's public endorsement. James entered the boardroom as if summoned by the mention of his family. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually pristine appearance showing signs of strain. But his voice was clear and determined. "I've spent the last 3 hours reviewing every aspect of Maya's business plan," he announced, moving to stand beside her at the presentation screen. "The integration strategy isn't just sound, it's brilliant. We'd be idiots not to pursue it." Maya felt something shift in the room's energy. James's support carried weight with both boards, and his obvious exhaustion spoke to the seriousness with which he'd considered her proposal. "There's something else," James continued. "I've been investigating Marcus Webb's financing. His venture fund has backing from several offshore entities that specialize in corporate raids. This isn't just business for him. It's a systematic dismantling of American manufacturing." Elena pulled up financial documents on the screen. "We've traced 3 of his previous acquisitions. In each case, he eliminated 70% of jobs within 6 months and sold the physical assets to foreign investors." The implications hung heavy in the room. Maya watched the board members' expressions shift from skepticism to anger as they realized the scope of Marcus's operation. Wells spoke first. "What do you need from us?" "Unity," Maya replied. "When we walk into that press conference, we need to present a united front. No hesitation, no internal conflicts for Marcus to exploit." Morris nodded slowly. "And the employees? They're still nervous about job security." "Which is why James will be announcing his return to active leadership at Ashworth Industries, working directly with me on the integration." Maya turned to James. If you're willing. James met her gaze, and Maya saw something there she hadn't seen in 5 years. Complete trust. I'm willing. David cleared his throat. There's one more thing. I've been monitoring Marcus's communications. He's planning something for today's press conference. A disruption of some kind. What kind of disruption? Victoria asked. Unknown. But he's hired private security and positioned them around the building. It could be anything from aggressive questioning to more serious interference. Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that preceded major decisions. Then we need to be ready for anything. As the board meeting concluded with unanimous approval of the integration plan, Maya found herself standing alone with James in the now empty conference room. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished table. Are you sure about this? Maya asked quietly. Working together, I mean. It won't be easy. James moved closer, his voice dropping to match hers. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Besides, I owe you this much. You don't owe me anything. I owe you 5 years, James replied. And maybe a chance to see what we could build together professionally, if not personally. Maya felt her carefully constructed walls wavering. James, I know. Too much. Too fast. But Maya, watching you these past few days, the way you've handled Marcus, the way you've protected the employees, the way you've chosen principle over revenge, I'm seeing the woman I fell in love with in college. The one who never needed my family's approval because she was already extraordinary. Before Maya could respond, Elena appeared in the doorway. Press conference starts in an hour. Security's reporting unusual activity in the surrounding blocks. Maya straightened, shifting back into CEO mode. Then let's give Marcus the fight he's been asking for. As they prepared to face the media circus waiting outside, Maya caught her reflection in the conference room's glass walls. The woman looking back at her was tired, stressed, but no longer haunted by old wounds. She was someone who'd chosen to build rather than destroy, to unite rather than conquer. The war for Ashworth Industries was about to reach its climax, and Maya finally understood that the real victory wouldn't be defeating her enemies. It would be discovering who she became in the process. The press conference had been a success, but the real work began in its aftermath. Maya stood in her office as the Boston skyline darkened into evening, watching the last of the news vans pull away from the building. The unified front she and the Ashworth family had presented had effectively neutralized Marcus's latest attacks, but the emotional toll was evident on everyone's faces. James knocked softly on her door before entering. He carried 2 cups of coffee and the exhausted expression of someone who'd spent the day rebuilding bridges he'd thought were permanently burned. Thought you might need this, he said, offering her one of the cups. Maya accepted it gratefully, inhaling the familiar aroma. Thank you. For today, for the press conference, for... She gestured vaguely. Everything. James settled into the chair across from her desk, the same chair where Marcus had sat just days earlier with his poisonous offers. The contrast wasn't lost on either of them. Maya, we need to talk. Really talk. James's voice carried a weight that made her look up from her coffee. About us. About what happened 5 years ago and what's happening now. Maya felt her chest tighten with the familiar instinct to deflect, to protect herself behind professional boundaries. But the events of the past week had stripped away so many of her carefully constructed defenses. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of what? Of this. Of us. Of letting myself believe that people can actually change. Maya set down her coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly. Your mother's confession today changed everything I thought I knew about the past. But changing my understanding doesn't erase the pain. James leaned forward, his blue eyes serious. I can't undo what I did 5 years ago. I can't take back the fact that I chose my family's approval over fighting for us. But Maya, I can promise you that I'm not that person anymore. How do I know that? How do I know you won't choose them again when things get difficult? Because I'm choosing you now, when everything is difficult. James's voice strengthened with conviction. I'm choosing to work with you, to trust you with my family's legacy, to stand beside you against someone who wants to destroy everything we've both worked for." Maya studied his face, looking for the uncertainty she remembered from their college days. But the man sitting across from her carried himself differently now, with the confidence of someone who tested his own values and found them solid. "The press conference today," Maya said slowly, "when you defended my integration plan in front of the cameras, that wasn't about business, was it?" "No." James's smile was rueful. "That was about finally standing up for what I should have stood up for 5 years ago. You." A soft knock interrupted them. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her usual commanding presence tempered by something Maya was learning to recognize as vulnerability. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Victoria said, "but I wanted to speak with both of you before I left." Maya gestured to another chair. "Please, sit." Victoria settled herself with characteristic grace, but Maya noticed the way her hands folded carefully in her lap, a gesture that spoke of nervous energy being tightly controlled. "Maya, I owe you more than an apology," Victoria began. "I owe you acknowledgement. What you've accomplished, not just in business but in character, is remarkable. The way you've chosen to protect our employees, to preserve rather than destroy. I was wrong about you." "You were protecting your family," Maya replied. "I understand that now." "I was protecting my fears," Victoria corrected. "My fear that you'd be everything I had been. Ambitious, ruthless, willing to sacrifice relationships for success. But today, I watched you choose differently. You chose to build bridges instead of burning them." James reached across the desk, his hand covering Maya's. "The question is, what do we choose now?" Maya looked at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of connection she'd denied herself for 5 years. "I want to try," she said quietly. "But slowly, carefully. I need to know that we're building something real, not just trying to recapture something that's gone." "We're different people now," James agreed. "Maybe that's good. Maybe we can build something better than what we had before." Victoria stood gracefully. "I'll leave you two to work out the details. But Maya, I want you to know, you're welcome in this family. You always should have been." As Victoria left, Maya felt something loosening in her chest, a knot of resentment and pain that had been tied tight for 5 years. Not gone, but softer somehow. "So," James said, his thumb tracing gentle circles over her knuckles, "where do we start?" Maya looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the darkness. "With honesty, with patience, with the understanding that love isn't enough if it's not backed up by choices." "Every day?" "Every day." James lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her fingers. "I can live with that." Maya felt a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, the first genuine smile she'd allowed herself since this whole ordeal began. "Good. Because tomorrow we have a company to run. Together." As they sat in the comfortable silence that followed, Maya realized that the revenge she'd planned had transformed into something entirely unexpected. A second chance. Not just for her and James, but for all of them to become better than they'd been before. The war was far from over. But for the first time in 5 years, Maya felt like she was fighting for something worth winning. 3 months later, Maya stood in the renovated main conference room of Ashworth Industries, watching the final presentations of their integration pilot program. The room itself reflected the changes taking place throughout the company. Traditional mahogany panels now alternated with modern glass installations, creating a space that honored the past while embracing the future. James sat beside her, his laptop open as he tracked real-time production metrics from their newly integrated supply chain. The ease with which they worked together had surprised everyone, including themselves. The personal healing between them had translated into professional synergy that exceeded even Maya's optimistic projections. Revenue projections are up 18% from last quarter, Elena announced from her position at the presentation screen. She'd officially accepted the role of Chief Innovation Officer for the combined companies, splitting her time between Boston and San Francisco. The cross-platform integration is performing even better than our initial models predicted. David, now heading the company's sustainability initiatives, added his own report. Employee satisfaction surveys show marked improvement across all departments. The retention programs Maya implemented have reduced turnover by 30%. Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction watching the presentations. This was what she'd always wanted to build. Not just a successful business, but a place where people could thrive. "There's one more item on the agenda," James said, closing his laptop and standing. His expression carried a mixture of nervousness and anticipation that made Maya's pulse quicken. "The partnership restructuring proposal," Elena said, consulting her notes. "Right. The board approved the new equity distribution last week." "Actually," James said, his eyes finding Maya's across the room, "this is something different." Maya felt her breath catch as James moved to stand in front of the gathered team. Elena, David, Patricia, who'd driven up from Pennsylvania for the quarterly review, and several department heads who'd become integral to the integration process. "Maya," James began, his voice steady but his hands slightly trembling. "5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you walk away. 3 months ago, you gave me a chance to prove I'd learned from that mistake." Maya's heart started racing as James reached into his jacket pocket. "I know we said we'd take things slowly. I know we agreed to build something new rather than trying to recapture the past." James pulled out a small velvet box, and Maya heard Elena's sharp intake of breath. "But some foundations are strong enough to build a lifetime on." The conference room had gone completely silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and Maya's thundering heartbeat. James opened the box, revealing a ring that was nothing like the ostentatious display she might have expected from the Ashworth family. Instead, it was elegant in its simplicity, a single diamond set in platinum, classic and timeless. "Maya Sullivan," James said, dropping to one knee in front of the presentation screen, "will you marry me? Not as an Ashworth heir trying to claim a brilliant CEO, but as a man who's learned that the best partnerships are built on equal respect, shared values, and the choice to keep choosing each other every single day." Maya felt tears threatening as she looked around the room at the faces of people who'd become more than colleagues. They'd become family. Elena was grinning so widely Maya thought her face might split. David looked like he was trying not to cry. Patricia's expression was a mixture of joy and the fierce protectiveness that had characterized Maya's entire childhood. "The quarterly projections are excellent," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly. "But I think we can do better." James's face went pale. "Maya, with better profit-sharing structures, expanded healthcare benefits, and a CEO who's actually happy." Maya stepped closer, reaching out to help James to his feet. "Yes, James Ashworth. Yes, I'll marry you." The conference room erupted in applause and cheers as James slipped the ring onto Maya's finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for this moment as long as they had. Elena was the first to reach them, pulling Maya into a fierce hug. "I'm so happy for you," she whispered. "You deserve this. You deserve all of it." Patricia approached more slowly, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your father would have been proud," she said quietly, embracing both Maya and James. "Not of the business success, though he would have loved that too, but of the woman you've become." As the celebration continued around them, Maya caught James's hand and led him to the window overlooking the harbor. The same view that had seemed so ominous during her takeover now sparkled with possibility. "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked quietly. "Really sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back to the way things were." James squeezed her hand, the engagement ring catching the afternoon light. "Maya, the way things were nearly destroyed both of us. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. Together." Maya looked out at the city that had witnessed her greatest triumph and her deepest transformation. In the distance, she could see the construction cranes working on new buildings, always building, always reaching higher. "Then let's build something amazing," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The war that had brought them together was over. The future they would create together was just beginning. 1 year later, Maya stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive suite, watching the sun rise over Boston Harbor. The building around her hummed with the energy of nearly 3,000 employees, beginning another day at what the business press had dubbed the year's most successful corporate integration. The Ashworth Sullivan logo gleamed from the building's facade, a symbol that represented not conquest, but collaboration. Maya still sometimes marveled at how completely her original vision of revenge had transformed into something she'd never anticipated. Genuine partnership. James emerged from the adjoining office, 2 cups of coffee in hand, and the satisfied expression of someone who'd just closed a major deal. "The Singapore expansion is officially approved," he announced, handing her a cup. "Operations begin next quarter." Maya accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the familiar aroma. "Elena will be thrilled. She's been pushing for an Asian market presence since the integration began." Speaking of Elena, James settled beside her on the small couch they'd added to the office. "She called this morning. The patent application for the automated quality control system was approved." Maya smiled, thinking of her best friend who'd recently been named Chief Technology Officer for their expanding operations. Elena had embraced the challenge of scaling their innovations across traditional manufacturing, and the results had exceeded everyone's expectations. "Any word from David on the sustainability audit?" "Clean across all facilities. The environmental upgrades you insisted on implementing have actually improved efficiency by 12%. James's voice carried pride and something deeper, genuine respect for the choices Maya had made as a leader. A soft knock interrupted their morning briefing. Victoria appeared in the doorway, looking elegant as always, but with a warmth in her expression that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "Good morning," Victoria said, entering with the confidence of someone who belonged. "I wanted to review the final details for tomorrow's anniversary celebration before the board meeting." The anniversary celebration had been David's idea, a company-wide event marking 1 year since the integration announcement. What had started as a simple employee appreciation lunch had evolved into something much larger, a showcase of how the combined company was not just surviving but thriving. "The employee retention statistics are remarkable," Victoria continued, consulting her tablet. 94% retention rate, highest productivity metrics in company history, and employee satisfaction scores that are off the charts. Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction. These weren't just numbers. They represented real people whose lives had been improved by the choices made in this room. "There's something else," Victoria said, her tone shifting slightly. "Marcus Webb was arrested yesterday." Maya's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Arrested?" "Securities fraud, corporate espionage, and conspiracy charges," James explained. "The investigation you helped initiate last year finally gathered enough evidence. Apparently, we weren't his only target." Maya felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. Marcus's downfall felt inevitable rather than satisfying, the natural consequence of choices that prioritize destruction over creation. "Will this affect our operations?" Maya asked. "The opposite," Victoria replied. 3 companies he'd targeted are now interested in partnership discussions. "Your reputation as someone who chooses collaboration over conquest has gotten attention throughout the industry." Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Saw the news about that Webb fellow. Justice has a way of working itself out. Proud of you for choosing the high road. See you at the celebration tomorrow." Maya smiled, thinking of her mother who'd relocated to Boston permanently after the engagement announcement. Patricia had found work at a local community college, helping first-generation students navigate the complexities of higher education. A perfect fit for someone who'd spent 20 years supporting her own daughter's dreams. "Maya," James said quietly, "there's something I want to show you." He led her to the conference table where he'd spread out architectural plans. "I've been working with David on this," he explained. "A proposal for the 5-year expansion." Maya studied the drawings, seeing not just new facilities but a vision of sustainable growth that honored both innovation and tradition. "This is beautiful work. It's also completely dependent on your approval," James said, "because none of this works without the kind of leadership you've brought to the company." Maya traced the lines of the proposed facilities with her finger. A year ago, she'd stood in this building planning the destruction of the Ashworth family legacy. Now she was designing its expansion into something larger and more meaningful than its founders had ever imagined. "There's one more thing," James said, his voice taking on the nervous quality that always preceded his most important announcements. I have been thinking about what kind of legacy we want to build. Not just for the company, but for... He gestured between them. For our family. Maya's breath caught. James, I know we haven't talked about it directly, but Maya, I want everything with you. The business partnership, the marriage, and yes, someday, kids who grow up understanding that success means building something worthwhile, not just accumulating power. Maya looked out at the harbor where morning commuter ferries carried people toward their daily dreams and responsibilities. She thought of the scholarship girl who'd arrived in Boston 8 years ago with nothing but ambition and hurt feelings. That girl had planned to conquer this city, to prove her worth through dominance and revenge. Instead, she'd learned something far more valuable, that the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies, but from building something so strong and meaningful that former enemies chose to become allies. Yes, Maya said simply, turning back to James. Yes to all of it. The expansion, the future, the family we'll build together. James's smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms. Even the kids? Especially the kids. But they're getting bedtime stories about collaboration and innovation, not corporate takeovers. As they stood together in the office that had once been the symbol of Maya's revenge, and was now the foundation of their shared future, Maya caught their reflection in the window. The woman looking back at her was someone she'd never planned to become, not the conquering CEO or the rejected girlfriend, but something entirely new. Someone who'd learned that the most profound transformations came not from destroying the past, but from building something better on its foundations. The war was over. The real work of peace had begun. And Maya Sullivan, soon to be Maya Ashworth Sullivan, had never been happier to be proven wrong about what victory actually looked like. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.